today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. On the heels of Amanda Serrano's big win in the featherweight division, BoxingScene.com published an article
reference to the fight.
And in reference to Erica Cruz, former WBA featherweight champion, her epic display of heart opposite the ring Amanda Serrano, the biggest puncher in the division and one of the biggest punchers in the sport. Post-fight, Amanda, in a very classy display, extended an apology to Erica, saying, "I want to apologize to Erica Cruz for making her feel like we were looking over her by all the talks of a Katie Taylor rematch. We definitely aren't. She deserves respect. Hopefully the professionals will step up and know how important this unification is to us and focus on this fight," said Serrano. She followed up moments later with a reply to Hall of Fame broadcaster Al Bernstein's praise of the tweet, adding, "You know how important it is to me to pay attention to the details. I didn't want to bypass the fact that the media seems to be more focused on the Taylor rematch than this undisputed title fight. Erica is a warrior, and I will never overlook or underestimate her or anyone I fight."
Amanda's a classy broad.
And Erica Cruz, in spite of having suffered a defeat this past weekend, she's a brave warrior who really endeared herself to the fans who perhaps didn't know her ahead of that fight, but they know her now and they know what she's made of. It goes back to what I said a week ago. It's all about what you give.
This emphasis on unbeaten and unblemished records.
It's not all sunshine and rainbows. I mean, take a look at Jermall Charlo's unbeaten record, David Benavidez's unbeaten record, Demetrius Andrade's. But you tell me which one of those three guys is a bigger draw than Canelo Alvarez, who's got 2 losses.
One draw.
He's got blemishes on his record, but he's still a bigger draw than all those guys are. And it's because it's all about what you give.
Erica fought her ass off on Saturday. She fought her heart out.
Erica Cruz, Mekhaled
shared the ring with Alicia Baumgartner in the co-main event to the main event. That's yet another fighter that fought her ass off, fought her heart out, and endeared herself to the fans in doing so. A fighter I'd like to see more of on a major platform.
Moving forward, we have to question, what is next for Erica Cruz? What is next for Mekhaled? Well, I think given what Erica put on display opposite the ring, the biggest puncher at featherweight and one of the biggest punchers in the sport, I think it's safe to say there's a good chance that Erica could see herself becoming a world champion again. Perhaps not in the immediate future.
It's possible.
Let me tell you one fucking thing. There are not a lot of girls that can go to distance with Erica Cruz. Given what she put on display opposite the ring, one of the biggest punches in the sport, no sir.
The featherweight division is a deep and talent-rich division, but make no mistake, there's not a lot of girls out there that can stand up to what Erica stood up to. Moreover, there's not a lot of girls that can stand up to Erica.
There's a lot of good fighters, a lot of good unbeaten up-and-comers coming through featherweight. Sophie Elish of Germany, Sky Nicholson of Australia, Karis Artingstall, and Raven Chapman from the United Kingdom.
There's a lot of good fucking fighters coming through.
Every single one among them could suffer their first professional loss opposite the ring, a persistent pressure fighter like an Erica Cruz, who's not going to leave you alone, and she's not going to go away.
Yeah, Amanda Serrano couldn't knock her out, so you think a Sky Nicholson throwing singles, throwing one shot at a time, staying on the outside, you think she'd knock her out?
Sophie Elish, you ain't big on power. You think she'd knock her out?
She wouldn't.
It's not because they're not good fighters. They're good fighters. They're very good fighters. I'm just telling you. Erica Cruz, she's nothing to mess around with. Based on what I saw on Saturday, there's a chance that she could see herself becoming a world champion again.
Something very similar applies to Mekhaled.
There's never been a full-fledged champion before, per se, but you know, it's conceivable that Alicia Baumgartner, that she's going to move up in weight real soon. She's this division's undisputed champion, and she's
unified the entire division, the entire weight class. There's not much left for her to do at 130 pounds. Not really.
You have to wonder what's going to happen once those belts are redistributed. Former unified champion Mikaela Mayer made light of a very interesting tidbit, saying, wait. I just started this new show on Netflix called Physical 100, and guess who the fuck is on it? Hyun-Mi Choi! So the bitch can compete on a reality show, but can't defend her belt? LOL, what a joke.
She tagged the WBA's Twitter page.
Hyun-Mi Choi was deemed a champion in recess upon the heels of an order from the WBA ordering her to unify titles with Alicia Baumgartner, and rather than doing that, she attended the convention and stated that she was injured, that she couldn't fight. As a result of that, she was labeled a champion in recess, which means as soon as she wants a shot at the WBA title, she can get it.
But if she's faking injuries to compete on reality TV shows in South Korea, Do you think she wants a fight with Alicia?
Because she's a champion in recess by way of the WBA, she is in a pole position to challenge for the title as soon as it becomes vacant, and I think that's what she's waiting for. I think she's waiting for Alicia to move up. I think she's waiting for Alicia to vacate those titles so she can pick up the WBA title.
She likely wants to fight a handpick for it as soon as it goes vacant.
That's by way of the WBA. By way of the WBC, former WBC lightweight champion Delphine Persoon is in a pole position to become a super featherweight champion.
Yeah, I think she's got a WBC silver title. She's in the queue.
She's also number one by way of the IBF. Former WBO champion from Poland, Iwa Brotnicka, is ranked right behind her at number 2.
No fucking way she fights Delphine.
Argentinia's Karen Carbajal ranked right behind them.
Behind Jennifer Hearn, who, unless I'm mistaken, may have retired.
Belts are going to get redistributed. The WBO, they don't actually post their rank standings for female fighters, so we don't know who they have in the queue, but that does leave the door open for Mekhaled to potentially get herself back in the winner's bracket. Not just get herself back in the winner's bracket, but see herself become a champion in her own time, because based on what I saw on Saturday, this is a tough lady.
She's got the kind of toughness that you can't teach.
Won't find that in a manual. She was hurt several times by Alicia Baumgartner. Dropped.
She almost got stopped.
She wouldn't give up. She wouldn't quit. Wouldn't stay down.
I see a future champion in this fighter.
Someone who has endeared themselves to the fans and has the kind of resilience and persistence that may see them become a champion very soon.
If Alicia moves up and vacates those titles within the next few months, Mekhaled may get another crack at the apple, and I think she can do it.
Just some things to think about in light of this past weekend's action. Men's super middleweight and light heavyweight news, Eddie Hearn stated 168 pounds is not Canelo Alvarez's requirement for a Bivol rematch. It is Dimitri Bivol who asked to look into it.
That might come as a surprise to many who might have thought that it was Canelo attempting to drain Dimitri, to bring him down.
It's obviously a big money fight, but Dimitri's not just about money, Hearn said. He wants legacy, and he likes the Beterbiev fight as well. He wants to be undisputed. That's why we talk about being undisputed at 68. That's not Canelo's requirement. We're just saying to Dimitri, if you're comfortable at 68, fight for undisputed at 68. It'd be quite amazing. And he makes 175 so easy, I know he can make 71 like comfortable. But 68, that's on him and his team. He would never take that fight at 68 if he was not advised that he would be effective at that weight. You know, I've seen a lot of people say, oh, you're trying to bring him down. No, he has asked to look into that prospect.
There was a quote from Dimitri a few days ago stating quite plainly that he just wants belts. He wants more belts at either 175 or 168, whichever is easier to do.
That's what he said, and those were his words.
Just like all that stuff about him being able to make super middleweight, for years now.
Well before he beat Canelo Alvarez, well before this ball even got rolling, he stated quite plainly he'd be willing to come down to super middleweight back when Callum Smith was that division's reigning Ring Magazine and WBA champion. He stated he'd be willing to move down for that fight on more than one occasion.
Eddie Hearn is now saying that this proposition to face Canelo at 168 pounds came from Team Bivol,
which is consistent with a previous story we talked about here on the channel, how Dimitri Bivol said in plain English, he just wants more belts at either 175 or 168, whichever is easier to do.
My thoughts.
I'm not too keen on a Bivol rematch. Personally, I'd rather see Dimitri go straight into the undisputed title fight with Artur.
There's been a lot of talk about Callum Smith, Artur's WBC mandatory challenger. There's been a lot of talk about him facing Artur in Artur's next fight, but Callum's busy.
Callum Smith is set to return to action opposite the ring Stipian March 11th in Liverpool.
So while he's busy doing that, why not petition a WBC now? Petition for an exemption to the mandatory so that Artur can go straight into the Dimitri Bivol fight.
So let's talk about Canelo and Bivol and 168 and 175 and Callum Smith and Artur when the best fight to make at 175 pounds, it's Bivol versus Beterbiev, and everybody knows it.
That's the fight.
Let the people at Matchroom and the people at Top Rank get their heads together to come up with a deal structure that works for everybody. It can be done.
Instead of worrying about Beterbiev versus Smith or Canelo versus Bivol.
Canelo, who according to Eddie Hearn, is insistent on fighting Dimitri Bivol. It's the only thing on his mind. Really is getting revenge at either 175 or 168. The reason we talk about 168 is actually not for Canelo Alvarez, it's for Dimitri Bivol, because Bivol is about legacy. He's saying he can make 68, so we're saying if you want, you can fight for undisputed at 68. The money's going to be massive for Bivol to fight Canelo, but he'd just be defending his title at 175, which is still a big fight. But what we're saying is, if you want to fight Canelo at 68 for undisputed, then you can go on and fight Beterbiev after that, and ultimately have 2 undisputed fights back to back.
Word around the campfire is that Canelo Alvarez has been doing the rounds, and he's been saying he wants to fight at light heavyweight. He wants to fight at 175 pounds, and we talked about that here on this channel.
Whereas Team Bivol seems to want to fight at 68 for Canelo's belts at 68 because they like their chances.
A lot of people do.
Now, Bivol against Beterbiev is an unbelievable fight, and I love that fight, and I think it's one we should push to make. Beterbiev's mandatory is Callum Smith, our guy. We also want to push for that fight. If Bivol waits until September to fight Canelo, he'll fight in the interim, which could be Joshua Buatsi. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know which way it's all going to play out, but I know that Canelo Alvarez is saying to me, make sure I get my chance against Dimitri Bivol.
And Eddie can do what he can, though ultimately, if Team Bivol and Team Beterbiev want to go into a fight with each other next, there's nothing Eddie can do about it, or Canelo.
All Eddie can do is make the fight, honor his fighters' requests, and all Canelo can do, in that situation, all Canelo can do is wait. The question is, does Artur Beterbiev really want this fight? Does he want to become the light heavyweight division's undisputed champion? Because if he does, the ball is actually in his court, not Dimitri's, not Canelo's, and not Eddie's.
Your next mandatory challenger by way of the WBC, he's set to see action in March. That gives you from now till March to petition the WBC for an exemption to the mandatory.
Longer than that if he really wants the fight.
Artur Beterbiev, who's a practicing Muslim, will be observing Ramadan.
In that time, Artur's people can petition the WBC for that exemption. At the same time, Dimitri can petition for that license to compete for the WBC title as a non-Russian fighter. And he can do it because he's based out of LA and he's born...
He was born in Kyrgyzstan, not Moscow, not Chelyabinsk.
If they want to fight, they can do the fight. They have the window of opportunity to do the fight.
I want to keep hearing about how Callum Smith is Artur's mandatory challenger. Callum's busy. He's fighting in March.
I want to keep hearing about a Canelo Alvarez rematch. I want Bivol versus Beterbiev.
Oh, you've heard me say this before? I sound like a broken record?
Well, it's because I want Bivol versus Beterbiev. The best versus the best. At 175 pounds, Dimitri Bivol already beat Canelo.
We've seen that already.
Can't keep talking about how Artur's got a mandatory to satisfy in Callum when Artur ain't even Callum's next fight. And there's enough time there for Artur's people to pursue this fight if they want it. Now, you guys out there, I don't care who you think wins. I don't care who you like more than somebody else. The ball's in Artur's court and Top Ranks to make this thing happen.
It's on them.
Finally, DAZN released their schedule of fights from February until May, a solid schedule that does not require an additional cover charge from the consumer. These fights, they're all part of your existing DAZN subscription, assuming that you have one. And many of these fights we knew about, solid fights, like Wood versus Lara, a very dangerous fight where a knockout is almost guaranteed. Anthony Joshua's upcoming fight with Jermaine Franklin.
Bam Rodriguez's bid to become a 2-division champion, moving down from Superfly down to flyweight for the vacant WBO title.
Shavkat Rakhimov versus Joe Cordina. We knew that was coming. We knew that was in the works for Shavkat Rakhimov's newly obtained IBF title. And Taylor versus Serrano too, which was announced this past weekend.
Many of these fights we knew about. Many of them are solid fights.
Some of these fights we've been anticipating a bit more than others, though the real appeal here is that it is value for money. Not a single one of these fights, not even Anthony Joshua's ring return, is being billed as a pay-per-view.
That's a power play.
But not according to Frank Warren's lapdog, DAZN. DAZN, who stated, so if you pay £99 today, you get a reduced rate at a DAZN sub until February 2024. The schedule has only been announced to May 2023, so customers need to trust the later content will be good. Then likely pay-per-view on top for some fights. Heavy-handed and panicked approach, in my opinion.
Isn't this the guy who picked Anthony Yard to beat Artur Beterbiev?
One in the same. The guy who's employed by Frank Warren. The guy who regularly takes shots at the DAZN platform, Matchroom, as a promotional outfit on behalf of Frank Warren.
And I won't lie to you, Old Fish Eyes Frank Warren has staged at least one good fight, one really good fight so far this year, the Anthony Yard versus Artur Beterbiev fight.
And I can think of at least 2 other shows involving Frank Warren in Queensbury that are set to go down that are good shows, good fights, like Joe Joyce versus Zhilei Zhang and Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk, whenever that is officially announced. But outside of those 2 fights,
One of which is a pay-per-view.
what else does Frank have going on? Matchroom just announced 8 fights. 8 fights from February until May.
8 fights at no additional charge.
Dev Sonny asks, what will the rest of the year look like? What's the rest of Queensbury's year going to look like is the better question.
Biggest fight they're set to put on is Usyk versus Fury.
You will notice that on DAZN's schedule, you don't see Canelo Alvarez's next fight. Not yet.
You're doing a pay-per-view in the near future, and so are they. But they've announced 8 separate fights that aren't pay-per-views.
Do you got 8 fights you want to tell us about?
And if you tell us about them, are we going to actually be interested?
Outside of those 2 shows, those 2 cards, Joyce versus Zhang and Fury versus Usyk, I don't really see what else Queensbury Promotions has going on. You compare the DAZN schedule to Showtime's upcoming schedule.
What's that, 4 or 5 pay-per-views in a span of 4 or 5 months?
They've only got about 3 fights on their regular schedule, about 3 fights that aren't box office fights, and then everything after March is a pay-per-view for a value of roughly $380.
Before you go telling me about how expensive a DAZN subscription is.
It's basically a little over $100 for an annual subscription for boxing year-round versus $380 for just 5 fights.
Math ain't mathin'.
It's not. Back to Dev Sonny, where Dev Sonny looks at this as a heavy-handed and panicked approach. In his opinion, his reaction to the schedule seems panicked to me.
If you guys over there have a better schedule than this, by all means, roll it out.
All I see is 2 shows, 2 cards. Joyce versus Zhang and Fury versus Usyk.
That's it.
They've also got the Jake Paul versus Tommy Fury fight, box office fight, pay-per-view, if you're into that stuff.
They've got that coming up, but how much actual boxing does Frank Warren have coming down the pipeline?
But then again, it's Dev Sonny. What do you expect him to say?
He picked Yard to beat Beterbiev, remember?